In one of Gary's recent videos, talking about the amazing atheist, I think, he was referring to this this whole question about rape and male responsibility for their participation in rape and in sexual violence and violence more generally. And I just want to say a few things about that. I mean, firstly, I'll first talk about a little bit about what Gary said, and then I want to come on to something that's to be serious, just hinted at in a comment. But he's basically saying, if I understand him correctly, that, well, he kept using the word broken, that there's some broken people around, and these are the people who carry out the rapes. I don't think that's right, actually. I think that's incorrect. And that's, in a sense, that's a sentiment which is echoed in slightly less overt form in some other videos that I've seen around and some other comments on videos, which is that people are saying, oh, well, if a woman says no, of course that means no, and I couldn't possibly continue, or yeah, these are psychopaths. That's the kind of approach. And I'd really like to believe that. I'd really like to believe that there are some individuals, some men in this case, in relation to this particular activity, that there are some men who, by dint of genetic predisposition or by dint of brain psychopathy or something like that, are completely different to the rest of us men, would always take no for an answer, would, I beg your pardon, would never take no for an answer, or are just damaged inside. They're just broken. They're the bad apples in an otherwise, fantastic barrel of good eggs and good apples like myself. I'd like to pretend that's the case, but I just don't believe it, to be honest with you, and I don't think the evidence supports that, except in a very few limited cases. Of course, there are psychopaths around, undoubtedly. There are people who are bad, there are people who are damaged, and there are people who are psychotic in one way or another, and they're relatively easy to identify, probably relatively easy to treat and save and protect the public from. But most rapes, most crimes of that kind, most atrocities aren't carried out by psychopaths. Most of them are carried out by to a public, people like yourself and myself. And the whole idea of them being broken, I think, is I think it's actually part of denial. I think it's actually part of all of us distancing ourselves from the horrors of what we are all capable of, if I'm honest. I know I sound like I'm feeding into the Andrea Dworkin feminist agenda, and probably I am actually. I think she does say something like, all men are potential rapists. I don't know, overstate that, but I think there's a grain of truth in that. And I think all humans are potential killers, and all of us. It's not that we're all potential criminals of one kind or another. But as I say, I think the evidence supports that evil is banal and evil is carried out by ordinary people, the guy next door, you and I. It's not carried out by special supervillains or psychopaths. And the kinds of evidence I would support is evidence taken from the extreme situations. I mean, particularly things like warfare, but even less severe situations. I mean, certainly the history of crime during warfare is not of evil men doing evil things. It's of ordinary kids, ordinary 19, 20, 21-year-old lads put in extreme situations, doing things which are unbelievably appalling. I mean, if you just look at some of the Goya's Disasters of War series, it's a series of etchings of atrocities carried out. Great deeds done to the dead is a famous etching from that series of men with parts of their body cut off. It's just appalling, war crimes. And probably the most clear case would be the My Lai atrocities during the Vietnam War, which again was carried out by young boys, not too different from myself, from my kids, from people out in the street, who were put in a slightly stressful situation with less than effective leadership, and again carried out horrendous acts of violence and acts of sexual aggression, rapes, and killing children, you name it. I mean, the worst crimes that humanity is capable of committing was carried out by 19-year-old boys from farms in Minnesota, just ordinary kids. And the same has been true, even to a possibly lesser extent, depending on how you feel about it. The pictures that came out of Abu Ghraib, which of course the administration says these are bad apples. It's nothing to do with bad apples. It's a combination of situation, of training, of context, of how groups form, and what is capable of happening in those horrendous situations. And it's the banality and the obviousnthis of it, and the unthinking acceptance of it whilst in those situations that gives it that horror. This is some of that stuff I referred to in a previous video about this book I've been looking at, between the monster and the angel, it's called. And it's just this. It's a really beautiful little book, but in it, this guy who writes it just talks about how easy it was for him when he was a teenager to be involved in a situation of sexual aggression. He just kind of goes along with it and is compliant because everything about the situation seems really obvious and unproblematic. There isn't this what we'd like to believe, this flaring up of moral outrage which prevents him doing it. And whilst I think I would like to believe that put in any kind of situation my natural morality will come out and I'll just say no, the evidence doesn't support that. The evidence supports at the moment that you, me and everybody else will pretty much go along with whatever's happening. Unless we're really, really careful, lots of vigilance, lots of counter training and lots of avoidance of situations which can steer our consciousness into ways which we just don't want, where the place we don't want them to go. So I don't buy the broken men, bad apples scenario at all. I think we're all capable of those things, and vigilance is absolutely necessary. And that really brings me to the thing that 2B Sirius says in one of the comments on one of my videos. She says, I wonder why it's only men that are talking about this. With that being an act of pondering why that is. I don't know what you're inferring by that, 2B Sirius, but certainly, in a sense, to me, it's gratifying that a lot of men are talking about this kind of stuff. It's a bit of a shame that so many of us are being self-congratulatory and complacent about our supposed inability to ever do things like that. I don't buy that. But I'm glad that people talk about it. I'm glad that, for example, the My Lai massacre is included, so I understand, in military training regimes as an example of how bad things can get, with the idea being you can instruct young men in what not to do in those situations, or how to avoid getting into those situations where you become the instrument of evil. That's something to celebrate. But I think if we're going to avoid finding ourselves put in those situations, we need to do several things. We need to avoid constructing those situations. That would be good. We need to recognise those situations when they're constructed for us by by some kind of forces outside of ourselves. Recognise those situations and get the hell out of them. And we need to talk about them amongst ourselves to raise our own consciousness about it. And it's not a consciousness of difference, that there's the broken people over there and we're not those broken people. We have to accept the banality and the possibility of our own evil and our own the possibility of our own contribution to those situations, and not be so high-minded about it, really. Nicotine said something which was really great. Actually, it was meant as a joke, but I think there's a serious side to it. Basically, he was saying that how to avoid raping someone. If you're tempted, go in the bathroom and have a wank. Basically, is what he was saying. If you're tempted, go to the bathroom and have a wank. It's a really, in a sense, it's a joke thing to say, but it's not just a joke. The take-home message for that is, if you absolutely need, if you can feel your limbic system strangling your forebrain and taking down your rational consciousness with it, and you can feel your sense of conscience dissolving in the kind of red mist of passion, then you're probably not functioning like a total human being at that moment, and it's probably best to find a way to restore the sexual homeostasis of your body, and relieving yourself in the bathroom is possibly a good way of doing that. Good advice, Nick. Good advice. Anyway, thanks very much.